All right, let's keep on this MR2. Previously on the MR2 build series, I used Autotempest.com to find the cheapest and also conveniently the absolute worst MR2 for sale on the internet. And then that got me this. I proceeded to take off all of the modifications that the previous owner had inflicted on the car, and then I did some modifications of my own, including wheels, tires, an oil pan, gutted catalytic converters and stuff like that. And now we are back with even more mods, and after we finish this stuff, I think that the car will finally be ready for the racetrack. So let's get to it. So if you remember, one of the final things I did to the car in the last video was a bumper cut on the rear bumper of the MR2. That exposed the rear crash bar, which I don't think is particularly attractive, so I'm going to be replacing it with an aftermarket unit. This is a piece from a company called Stingray Restomon. Really just a guy named David who I think just makes these parts in his spare time for fun. It's a nice little unit. It's got a built-in tow hook, and it's gonna look better than that OEM crash bar that you were never supposed to be able to see anyways. But this bar is still currently just raw metal, and I want to get it powder coated so that it doesn't rust or something like that. So that's gonna happen, and we will see this again later on in the video. In the meantime, we're gonna be talking about cooling upgrades, and we are upgrading the radiator with, of course, a coil rad, the only people we ever use for upgrading our radiators. This is going to be essential on a track car because obviously you want your car to stay as cool as possible when you're on the track. And while this might look like a fairly narrow radiator, when you see the OEM unit, this is a lot more capacity. This is a big upgrade as far as thermal efficiency. So let's go ahead and get started. Do not need this anymore. So this is the stock radiator, and it is just under 3/4 of an inch thick. So that compared to 1.5 inches, that should be a pretty significant difference, I think. I don't know that these cars have huge issues staying cool under regular circumstances. They're not like RX-7s or BMWs or something like that, where a radiator upgrade or a cooling system upgrade is an essential. But on track, they can definitely use the help. Another broken bolt. Ugh. That is disgusting. Radiator's coming out. This is not for people who are easily grossed out, because this is disgusting. In the comments, anybody know any bug experts? What do we got here? Oh, gross. A little comparison. We just took this out. Now we're putting this coil rad in. Just for reference, this is the difference in thickness that we're going to. Again, like 3/4 of an inch, maybe not even. And then this is 1.5 inches. So thermal efficiency should go up pretty significantly when we are at the racetrack, turning lap after lap after lap. Look at this fitment. This is gorgeous. Popped right in, absolutely zero issues. Like OEM, but prettier and more efficient. So, yeah, coil rad, you done it again. So now we're running over to Advanced to grab some fluids, and we're gonna do a big flush on the MR2. We're going to flush the MR2, as it were. As I've already gathered just from draining it, this is not like a regular coolant system, obviously. You have the radiator up front, then you have the engine in the back. There's a bunch of coolant lines running back and forth. And then there's the whole issue of making sure that you're bleeding it properly. So there's kind of a whole kind of unique bleeding process for the car as well that involves filling up the expansion tank, but then also up in the front trunk, in the frunk, you're gonna have some lines that are helping you make sure that the coolant level is equal front to back. Residual exhaust leak. So we're gonna put distilled water and then water wetter, which basically just raises the boiling point of water so that it works more effectively as a coolant, because glycol and ethanol and stuff like that, that stuff is all very slippery. Should you crash your car on the track or have some kind of cooling system malfunction where you spill coolant, that stuff makes the track very slick and it costs a lot of time and money to clean up. So better to run distilled water and water wetter if you know that you're going to be going to the racetrack with your car. All right, it's a new day and we are moving on to a new mod. We are going to address this absolutely horrific fender gap that we've got going on. I don't know why the car rides so high from stock, and later years actually increased the ride height by like, I think, an inch. So pretty incredible stuff. But let's see, what do we got going on wheel gap wise? Right at 4 inches of wheel gap from tire to fender. And then from the center bore of the wheel, we're right at 15 inches. 16 inches from center bore to fender, and 4.5 inches from tire to fender. So obviously that is pretty brutal, but luckily Fortune Auto has come through with a solution. This is a Fortune Auto 510 with their spring rates on here. So we are going to swap out this OEM suspension for this fantastic new stuff. This is my 4th set of 510s. I've had them on my 350Z, my Evo, my RX-7, and now on the MR2. It's fantastic stuff. Put a lot of track miles on them, put a lot of street miles on them, and they're gonna be phenomenal on the MR2. Pretty sure all these bolts are going to be really stuck. So despite the cumulative mechanical acumen of both Ben and myself, we still have a stuck end link on here.
Yeah, you're gonna have to cut it off.
Yeah. So I have 2 options here. I can either get new end links or run no sway bar whatsoever. But we're gonna run a sway bar, so. New end links it is. So that's gonna hold things up a little more than I anticipated, but if you ever worked on the car, you've probably broken stuff that you didn't intend to have to replace, and then you have to replace it. So there was really no getting around it on this one, unfortunately.
Is this what causes snap overs to your MR2s?
Yeah, this huge bar back here.
This little straw?
It's because this bar is too big.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How's your dust cover doing, bud? Hey, not so good, bud. That's seen better days, I think. More nests. Good. So this is the old strut and spring OEM that we have taken off. These are obviously very, very rough and old. And then these are the new Fortune Auto 510s that we are replacing them with. Another nice thing is that these have camber plates on top. So we're gonna be able to dial in all kinds of camber into the alignment. I'm sure that we are going to want more than what's there factory. Based on what I've read about MR2 track alignments, I think people usually go with quite a bit of negative camber in order to get a better contact patch once you're loaded up in the middle of the corner.
Before installing the suspension, I wanted to make sure I did my due diligence in measuring bump stop travel and droop to help determine an appropriate ride height and help the car handle its best on track. Ben came in and I had him help me out with some of the knowledge he's learned dialing in his Civic. We filmed it all, but it's laboriously technical and also we're not experts, so I'm skipping over most of it for this video, but we did measure and do some math. And as it turns out, Fortune had everything where I wanted it, right out of the box anyway.
So I set the suspension ride height on the coilover, accounting for the car lowering more once the actual weight of the car sat down on the wheels. But I didn't really factor in that there's no weight in the front of the car, basically. So we still have pretty tremendous wheel gap. It's down to 3.5 inches instead of 4 on the stock suspension. Just a little bit more tweaking, as you always have to do with suspension, and we should be good to go. So after I cut the bumper in the last episode, it really emphasizes this crash bar that you were never really supposed to see. It was supposed to be covered up by grills and stuff from the factory, and it's not exactly aesthetic. We are going to replace this with an aftermarket crash bar. I just had my buddy Andrew powder coat it over at TRE Fabrications here in town. So it's in this nice black that should look pretty subtle back here. I don't know that you would actually want to run this piece if you were in like a car accident or something like that. Probably not going to do the same job that this OEM crash bar would do. It's obviously not crash test rated. This is going to be primarily a track car. So yeah, this is a no-brainer for me. We've got the new bar on. It looks a heck of a lot better than the OEM crash bar. Fits really nice. I like the color. It's very subtle, but now we've got some titanium accents, these little titanium burn nuts that are gonna go on these studs. I picked these up from our office mates' dress-up bolts. They're literally down the hallway from my office, so I just walked over there and got some M10 by 1.25 nuts, and they'll give this bar a little bit of an accent so it's not just all black back here. But yeah, now we're pretty much done on the rear of the car, I think. Now we can start on the most ambitious and tedious part of this project. We have done pretty much everything we can to get this car as ready as possible for the racetrack, with one big exception, and you'll know what it is if you have ever taken a convertible to the racetrack. It is a roll bar. And the big reason why you need a roll bar if you're going to the racetrack in a Miata, an S2000, or I guess also an MR2, is because if the car rolls over, which is much more likely to happen at the racetrack than like on the street, then your head is going to be that other fulcrum for the car to try and pivot on, and it's not going to go well for you. Roll bars are required in most racing organizations, most HPD organizations. If you're trying to go on the racetrack, or even a lot of autocrosses, they will require that you have rollover protection like a roll bar. This is a beefy bar from Hard Dog, cool name for a company, but they make a lot of really high-end, durable, tested rollover protection for Miatas, S2000s, and also MR2s, I guess. So while this thing is pretty heavy, 60 to 70 pounds, I would say, I would not trust anything as much as this in the event of a rollover. I think that this is really gonna do its job. I hope I never need to use it. The only final hurdle is that the installation process is pretty involved. There's a good amount of interior removal. We have to drop the gas tank down. We have to cut holes into the body of the car in order to put bolts through. So you might see some more outfit changes over the course of the next 2 or 3 days as I just kind of take my time and get this thing installed properly. But you know, it's not gonna install itself, so let's get started pulling out a bunch of the interior on the car. I think there is some moisture underneath coming through the carpet, or this is Cheeto dust, but this is disgusting. Got it. We moved most of the stuff out of the car that we needed to remove in order to install the roll bar. And then I got a little bit carried away and decided to pull out the carpet as well because I saw all of this, you know, this obviously is water damaged. So I wanted to see kind of what the condition of everything was underneath the carpet. And I'm really glad I pulled it because, yeah, it's super gross. This, on the driver's side especially, this stuff is still damp. The car's been sitting inside for, you know, weeks. So I'm glad that we got this stuff out because the carpet is probably moldy. And then if you step over here, there's the beginnings of water damage, a bunch of corrosion. This stuff is damp and really gross. So I'm glad we pulled that stuff out. I'll probably just keep it out because again, I want this to be the car that I use at the racetrack. Don't really need all this extra carpet and stuff. This makes everything a lot simpler. And I think actually, once I get some of this corrosion removed and just get back down to the red paint, I think it'll look better too than having carpet in there. Okay, so we are now working with fuel, so wear protection. Still some wiring harness here that we need to unclip and move out of the way. And then we've got this textured sound deadening here and we need to chip that away in order to get the bar to be able to sit flush against the firewall, you know, massaging to make sure that everything fits up. Bar comes out, bar goes back in, bar comes back out, bar goes back in, etc. We need to remove the gas tank. Again, this is a very involved process to make sure that the cage is in and 100% secure. We're gonna drop the gas tank.
Doing great, guys. Doing great. It's looking good.
In order to cut into the body of the car and then drill holes for the bolts to travel through to make sure that it's totally secure. The roll bar came with a bunch of mounting plates and hardware to make sure that it has a nice solid base once we actually get it in there. We're getting about to that point where we're gonna need to start bolting these guys in. Unfortunately, for some of these, we are going to have to cut through the body of the car, like through the underbody, in order to make little access holes to install these. So this is, again, if you couldn't tell, a very time-consuming, lengthy process. Mission successful. We have bolts coming through the bar into this side of it, and then this is facing that way up in here, and obviously the only way to get it in there is cutting the body of the car open, so. Try and go for the bottom one. That one I know is, yeah, you getting it? Yeah, keep going. Nice, high five. So we've gone ahead and torqued down the bolts that go through to these plates that are inside the underbody of the car. So now we get to close up these doors, but in order to make sure that we don't get any rust starting inside this gap that we've exposed, we've got a couple of products. I went by Advance and I picked up some rubberized undercoating. So we're gonna spray that in here just to make sure that if any moisture gets in there, it doesn't have anything to grab onto. All this stuff is gonna be protected and coated. Then, to be doubly sure, I went to a hardware store and I picked up some big gap filler, which is basically just expanding foam that we're gonna spray in there afterwards and just fill up the space with foam. Then we're gonna push this door closed again, flush with the metal, and I've got aluminum tape, which is what I typically use to like hold down wheel weights when I'm at the racetrack to make sure my wheel weights don't come off, but this should also work just to seal up these gaps. And then I'll spray more rubberized undercoating on top of that. And I think at that point, we should be pretty safe. All of this would be much easier if I just knew how to weld, but I don't. So we're gonna go through all this stuff. All right, so we're done with this roll bar. It's installed. Can you believe it? Hallelujah. We've worked on this for about 4 days, very leisurely, like 15 hours probably, but a lot of that was spent doing stuff on the interior as well. We decided to take the interior out. It's so easy if you have a lift compared to not having a lift. Either way, it's gonna be time consuming. The gas tank is probably the most difficult part. And if you put it in, it's really never coming out. You know, if you want to take your MR2 to the track, you gotta have it. I'm glad we did it. Very satisfying thing to do. I think it looks good in here. It feels extremely sturdy. We're ready to go to the racetrack and see what this thing can do. Oh, I'm getting a pump. I'm feeling the pump. Oh, Luke, your turn.
Wow, look at his muscles. Wow.